Good afternoon, my friends. This is the Grim Flayer. Hope you're all doing very well today, and welcome to the third Jund League on the channel, Modern Jund League number 3. Of course, I played Jund more times than that on the channel, but until recently, it has always been in the form of a donation league. So this is like my third run out on the channel with a Jund list of my own devising. And guys, Jund is now part of the regular rotation on the channel. When I am playing my own lists for fun, it is going to be Jund now, alongside Rock, alongside Prowess. Jund is part of the family now, officially, feels good. It is still Kroxa Jund as well, but honestly, I don't think we need to label it Kroxa Jund anymore, because Kroxa is just like, as far as I'm concerned, a proven viable option in Jund, much like we wouldn't call a deck Confidant Jund or Scavenging Ooze Jund. Kroxa's kind of in those categories of something that you probably don't want more than 2 copies of, but it's a very viable 2-drop as a 1 of, or indeed as a 2 of, which I have been doing lately. So yeah, here it is, Jund League number 3. We did make a couple of changes to the list relative to the last time you saw me play. And they're both main decks. So the first thing I have done is I've added Bloodstained Mire number 4 for a total of 9 fetch lands. This came at the expense of a Blackcleave Cliffs, but you gotta do what you gotta do. The 9th fetch land does enable Kroxa better. It, both in terms of getting the correct colors that you need, but also in terms of filling up the graveyard. Also, of course, good with Wrenn and Six, and broadly good for consistency, of course, at the expense of a little bit more pain. But what's a little bit more pain when you're already playing the Jund mana base, right? So I think that change is warranted. I expect it to be helpful overall, but it does lose us a minor percentage point or 2 against the aggressive decks of the format. The second change I have made makes up for those points lost for the mana base and then some. We've cut a Dark Confidant. I still really like Bob, but I'm going to try playing him as only a 1 of for this league, and I am registering a Terminate, a card that a lot of other people have been playing, I believe to be well positioned right now. A more obvious thing to do would be to keep the 2 Bobs and replace maybe one of these cards here with for Terminate, but maybe it's my Rock background, but I think Jund decks already kind of play an alarmingly few number of these green-black catch-all removal spells. I personally think Pulse, Decay, Trophy, these are a huge attraction to playing the archetype in general, so I am opting for a little bit more of a controlling Jund build today, with those couple changes, but there you go. Otherwise, it's the same 75 we played the last couple times out, and maybe the third time will be the charm for us, who knows. Now, this is going to be a replay because this past week, I haven't had time to live record anything. I've just been sneaking in a few games here and there where I can. But, number 1, this league is very cool. I know you're going to like it. I hope you will stay with me for the duration, and that's why I'm bringing it to you in replay form here. And number 2, I have got a big pile of donation leagues coming down the pipeline, a different Jund variant, some Rock variants, maybe Abs and Stoneblade. We're going to be doing all kinds of live recorded BGX modern content in the month of February for your viewing pleasure. So let's get into this. We just have a big handful of new Patreon supporters to thank first. 5, to be exact. You love to see that. We have 2 brand new Inquisitors, Thomas Sloboda and Paul Jacob. Thank you so much, guys, for supporting this content. We have a Confidant, newly minted, welcome to the fold, Benny Jackson. Thank you so much, my friend. Truly appreciate it. And we have a tireless tier, very generous level of support, a tireless supporter named That Vietnamese Guy. So thank you so much, my friend. And last but not least is a member of the Unearthed tier. Want to give a special shout out to this guy, Alexander Dakic. Still don't know if I've got your name correct, my friend, but Alexander is a newly minted Players Tour participant who has given me some shout-outs in his write-ups around those tournaments that got him so much success with mono-red prowess. So As far as I know, Alexander, you're the first prowess player to give me Patreon support, so once again, my friend, big congrats to you on your great success. Here's hoping you crush it in 2020, and thank you for supporting this content. Thank you, as always, to all Patreon supporters. And now, without further ado, guys, let's jund them out. Round 1, game 1, and we are not going to jund them out with a 0-lander. Throw it back. Not a good start. Not a good start, is it? But we've got a pretty functional all-around 7 here with a really interesting decision. Already we're called into question here with our expertise. What should we send back? Well, I think we cannot afford to send back a land between the presence of K-Command and the presence of Raging Ravine, plus Nurturing Peatland is flood insurance, so we've got to bottom a spell. I chose here to go ahead and bottom Fatal Push because it is the most conditional. It's very efficient, but you know, Terminate should be able to do a poor man's push impression against a weenie, and indeed can hit a lot of things that push cannot, so we bottom the push, we Thoughtseize, and we see we are against a big mana deck, which we want to avoid, but that's kind of what Modern is overrun with now. But this is a more interesting, in my view, big mana deck, and frankly, one that we have a better matchup against. This is Dice Factory, so the idea here, they do make a ton of mana, so they play a lot of payoffs like Karn the Great Creator and other good high-end threats and things that can end the game, right? But they get there by doing a lot of really interesting stuff with cards like Core Tapper and Astral Cornucopia. They're basically making charge counters and then manipulating them, putting them from other things onto Astral Cornucopia is usually how it goes. And because they're playing these lower curve creatures and artifacts, we are indeed a lot more able to interact with it, especially with our main deck suite of interaction, than your typical big mana. So we take the payoff, Karn the Great Creator, partially because it's their only payoff, and partially because we cannot effectively pressure him right now. Opponent will go Urza's Tower, Cornucopia, and pass. And we do draw a way to pressure and a way to accrue some advantage. Bob is a really nice draw here. Gotta love drawing the one of Bobby, right? Opponent will go Core Tapper. Sorry, I just wasn't sure if I tracked their lands correctly, but it's a replay, so I already tracked it correctly the first time, right? I just want to show you accurately what's going on, too. Anyway, what really matters here is that we hit a couple painless lands off of Bob, and we get to live the K-Command dream, tagging the Core Tapper, tagging the Cornucopia, clearing the way for a Bob attack. That's a thing of beauty, my friends. That is why we play Jund. I'm not sure if I just tracked that correctly, but I'm pretty sure opponent top-decked Mine and Power Plant, if I'm not mistaken. So obviously them just naturally top-decking Tron. Tron is kind of in their deck incidentally. They don't really have much besides maybe Expedition Map, as far as I know, to try to assemble it. So opponent gets to lay down a big Ever-Flowing Chalice, which is another good mana producer in their deck, and a Chalice on 2. So fortunately they don't have any harder payoffs than that. But we will play Raging Ravine, we will play Dark Confidant, and then we must know what's in their hand. It's Blast Zone plus 1 unknown. I guess it might be another land in hand. Maybe, I think they might have had Double Tower. Anyway, so we hold back our 1-drops, and at the end, on the end step here, Lightning Bolt going upstairs I think is pretty fine, because we have a lot of mana sinks on field between drawing 2 cards, having the Ravine, having the Peatland. And speaking of Ravine, I think this is kind of our best play, is just to get in here. It's nice to have a threat that is not threatened by Blast Zone, which Raging Ravine is not. So we crash in for 7, and we've actually got lethal next turn, even if they kill our Bob, because Ravine plus Bolt is going to do it. So opponent will put a counter on the Blast Zone. They'll untap. They're tapping 10. Very, very scary. Lots of things would be really scary at that, but it's just another Ever-Flowing Chalice. Opponent kind of drawing the wrong half of the deck here. And then Blast Zoning away our Bob. We draw Kroxa, which is pretty cool, but the opponent, it shows them scooping here. They might have, or maybe we just attacked with Ravine and bolted them, I don't quite remember. Occasionally the replay will end things just like a half turn before it actually ended, for whatever reason. Imperfect software, as we all know. But anyway, guys, there we go. We had some pressure, but we didn't really naturally have it in our hand after that mulligan. Dark Confidant. Dark Confidant. A lot of people are lamenting the position of Jund right now. I've seen this in the Discord. I've seen this in other places. I think Jund is really well positioned, and I think a big part of it is a lot of people are not playing Bob and they're not playing Kroxa. Now, if you're against a big mana deck, both of these cards are awesome, and I understand they displace things like Scoos, and you lose percentage points in other matchups that way. I'm not trying to sell that short at all, but you want the pressure, and you want the disruption. Kroxa gives you pressure and disruption in these matchups. Bob gives you pressure and draws you into disruption in the form of his card advantage. So the big mana decks do become a little bit more beatable when you've got these cards around, but we had a decent curve out there despite the mulligan. Let's take him to game 2 and see what we can do post-side. Alright guys, so here is how I sided. Admittedly, not the most experienced against Dice Factory. It is a fringe archetype, but here's what I did. I think it's reasonable. We took out 5 cards. We got 2 copies of Fatal Push have gone. It's not without use cases, but the only small creature on my radar really is Core Tapper, which dies to Kolaghan's Command, Lightning Bolt, even to the Wrenn and Six ping, I believe, right? It's an X1. Seasoned Pyromancer, just because it's a little bit slow. Terminate, again, the creatures, the stuff that only kills creatures, not necessarily where we want to be. And 1 copy of Wrenn and Six, despite the ping being potentially okay. We don't, need the ping. It's not like they play a critical mass of X1s. And unless you are looping lands with Wrenn and Six, not really the most effective in the matchup as far as I can tell. What came in was 3 copies of Pillage, our second Kolaghan's Command, and a Collector Ouphe, all of our artifact hate, and Pillage, of course, doubles up as a Stone Rain, depending on what we need more. So, seems like a good sideboard to me, and seems like a reasonable hand here. Double Kroxa is not even really that awkward. Legendary effect is not really a limiting factor for this guy, right? So, opponent will go Once Upon a Time, Urza's Mine, Expedition map. It's not showing us on the replay what they found with Once Upon a Time. It was probably just that mine, to be honest, but in any case, we'll have full hand information after we resolve this Inquisition of Kozilek. So, opponent is only on a 2-lander, but they have Expedition map to hit land number 3. Ugin the Ineffable is a big payoff. It's a real scary card against us, to be honest, but they don't look like they're probably going to get it naturally on turn 3 unless they top deck Tron once again. So I just take away Chalice of the Void here. There is a okay argument for hitting the Chalice, just attacking their mana in general, but the rest of our hand does not attack their mana. The rest of our hand attacks their resources, puts pressure on them, and generates value for us, right? So I decided to follow the cues of our hand. Opponent drew a Surge Node, which is one of the ways they can manipulate these counters. They'll play the Blast Zone, and they've got their payoff as the only card left in their hand. Seems like a great time to get it right out of there with Kroxa to me, so that's exactly what we do. We've got the 3rd land waiting in the wings. Opponent will play an Inventor's Fair. Them making land drops is ultimately pretty good. Inventor's Fair, some decent utility there. And our Thoughtseize, pretty much a dead draw. So I do decide to get the Wrenn and Six online here. Start accruing value. We buy back a fetch land, but we'll play the Raging Ravine out. Get that down and we'll pass. Opponent will tutor up a Seagate Wreckage with the Expedition map. This is a really nice card against us if we're on this type of heavy resource denial plan. They'll play it and they'll say go. We found another land here. And you know what time it is. It is time to spin the wheel with good old Bloodbraid Elf, and we hit Liliana of the Veil. You love to see that. Now, it's not perfect, of course, because they do have the Seagate Wreckage to kind of rebuild if we're trying to keep them hellbent with Lily, but it's still good to tick her up. It's still good to make them, play around her and all that. We also get the free value with Wrenn and Six, looping a land to discard to Lily. Opponent end step will activate Seagate Wreckage, and they find a Karn, the Great Creator. Karn is going to tick down. They go get Liquimetal Coating, so this can limit our land in conjunction with Karn. They can Liquimetal Coating one of our lands on our upkeep, and it's kind of like a temporary Stone Rain. There might be other things they do with it as well, I'm sure. They also have a Surge node for turn, so opponent, putting a lot of stuff together, but they don't really have any way to withstand our board at the moment. We're pretty soft to them top decking something awesome, though, that is for sure. So we'll kick things off with a Bloodbraid, make sure we can get Karn off the table, and then Liliana is going to put that Thoughtseize in the bin. Then it's Kroxa time, just filling up our graveyard, advancing the clock. And while we could have activated Raging Ravine this turn instead, I kind of like sequencing this way better because it allows us to hold up these lightning bolts. It's good for dealing with anything unexpected, but it's also good just for emptying out our hand, really like turning the corner out of nowhere in terms of the clock. And also that makes Liliana not do any damage to us, right? We don't want to lose any resources to her, so that's why we sequence that way. We bolt them, they're down to 8 kind of out of nowhere. Opponent pulling off some shenanigans here on their own end step, moving counters around to Blast Zone and to Everflowing Chalice, respectively. And then they get to take care of Wrenn and Six and also draw a card with Seagate Wreckage with floated mana, so it's all pretty good for them. But of course, we do still have Liliana, so they're going to lose that card, whatever it is. Now, Tarmogoyf was our draw. We were all set up to, worst case scenario, we just, escape Kroxa and put them to 2, or maybe not put them to 2 if they have a non-land in hand, but we have a Kroxa on the field, or attack with Raging Ravine. Either one is good, but you know what? Playing a 6/7 Tarmogoyf and keeping all of our resources is also good too. So I did opt for that, but you could go a number of different ways there. I almost think leaving Kroxa in the graveyard is safer in case they have a board wipe effect of something like that. So we just played the Goyf. Opponent will untap, they'll manipulate the counters, they make a ton of mana. They play another Karn the Great Creator. They will tutor for Ensnaring Bridge, so this is kind of half what I expected to see the first time around, but they do get it now. And they're empty-handed, so now we have to beat the bridge. We draw Tarmogoyf. Tarmogoyf does not beat the bridge, but you know what does is Liliana of the Veil ult, and I just straight up put bridge all on its own. Kind of funny. They've got an entire board of amazing things there in a big mana deck, or the bridge, and they of course keep the bridge because they are just dead on board if they don't. But my friends, here is where Kroxa comes in. Kroxa delving away a bunch of the graveyard, putting them to 3. We get the other Kroxa back, and they are dead. The only problem is we don't quite have enough cards in the graveyard yet to do that. So I decide to hold the mountain, because I guess worst case scenario, we can start trying to discard to hand size, right? But Fetch Land is something we can run out, because of course that fills the graveyard in its own right. Opponent will play out a Walking Ballista. They're starting to have cards stuck in hand, so they just play that for 0, so our Bloodbraid cannot attack. It is back to us. We could be 1 card away from getting the Kroxa out and finishing them off. Instead, we just draw Assassin's Trophy, which is going to give us what are we attacking for. If we played the Mountain and fired up Ravine just to send a message, that would be 4 plus 12 plus 3 plus the Kroxa trigger. We're hitting for 18 this turn. Feels like I'm playing prowess, right? But nope, it's good old Jund, and the opponent will perish with literally no board left. Maybe a Wastes if they have one to fetch. That's about it. So what a feel-good way to start out this league, my friends. We drew pretty well. We disrupted pretty well. The opponent drew well in a sense, but they never had the perfect top decks of drawing enough mana to overcome our disruption and drawing the unbeatable payoffs, right? They kind of had medium payoffs or no payoffs for too long after kind of reassembling their mana through our disruption. So that's the beautiful thing about Jund. We have the clock, we have the disruption, we make them have it. In this case, they didn't quite have it. Like I said, to me, Dice Factory seems like a much better big mana matchup than Amulet Titan or Titan Shift or even Tron is, so there's that as well. But we got there. Nice clean 2-0. Let's check out round 2. Losing the die roll this time out, my friends, but the hand's totally fine, especially if they play to the board. And even if they don't, we've got a good top end. So there is a gap in between our early turns and our later turns. Obviously, we're not really doing anything proactive until turn 4, but Turn 1 unclaimed territory naming human, well, we know what that means, so obviously this Bolt and Terminate is looking pretty good here. Meddling Mage naming Lightning Bolt, though, that's a little bit of a tilt. That's actually really, really rough, and it could be the start of some bad news for us, especially because we drew another non-removal spell. Like, when they have one removal spell locked out, all you want to do is draw more removal. Even if you already have an out to it, just because things can really snowball out of control in a tempo sense or in a sense of them having follow-up forms of disruption that take away, that further Meddling Mages, things that take away the hand, all the above, right? So we do Terminate. I actually probably played the wrong land there. I probably wanted to play another Blackcleave Cliffs painlessly and then plan to get a basic forest off of that land. So maybe that was incorrect, but just kind of reflexively got my missing color down, I guess. And then they follow up with the Kitesail freebooter, so that's exactly what we mean. Definitely a little bit of a beat. This normally shouldn't happen. Like, one Meddling Mage and one freebooter really shouldn't be posing this much of a problem for us, but we're lacking the variety of removal. And then, oh no, Meddling Mage naming Bloodbraid Elf, and we have literally a Bloodbraid Elf only hand. So obviously, we're getting pretty unlucky here. Not really a whole lot we can do. We draw Kroxa, which is something, it gets Deputy of Detention out of their hand, sure, but certainly not what we wanted to see. And now we've got to fade them having a clock, but the opponent has Mantis Rider following up their disruption, so it's all a bit rough. Once again, just need to draw a kill spell. Once again, we don't. It's Tarmogoyf, it's pass back to the opponent, and they are going to continue just blowing out everything we're doing. Reflector Mage on the Goyf, we draw a fetch land, and that is going to be game. So, humans is a good matchup, but rather like in round 1, how I explained we have the disruption and the proactive clock on Jund to make Dice Factory really have the ability to survive the disruption and to stop the clock and to do their own thing. That's kind of, we got the tables turned on us with humans. We have all the tools in the world to beat humans. It's, like I said, I think it's a really good matchup. But they've got some disruption. They've got a proactive clock. The way their stuff lined up against us meant we just stumbled, and they just beat us really, really soundly here in Game 1. So that feels bad, but it does get way better post-side. Let's see if we can win both post-side games, beginning here with Game 2. Alright, so with my list against humans, we've got 6 cards that have got to come in. We've got Kalitas, we've got Anger of the Gods, we've got Plague Engineer, which is arguably the best of them all, we've got the second Kolaghan's Command, and we've got 2 copies of Collective Brutality. So to that end, we had to find 6 cards to come out. We're going to be on the play here. I think pretty much no matter what, siding out these 5 cards is fine. 2 Thoughtseize can definitely go. Trimming 1 Bloodbraid Elf from the top end is fine. You know, if your list is a little different, leaving in 1 Kroxa is fine, but with my list, I think bringing them both out is probably the way to go. And then on the play, I left in all 4 Lilianas of the Veil and trimmed a 4th Inquisition. But on the draw, if we manage to take them to Game 3, this Inquisition will come back in and we'll go down to 3 Lilianas. So that is how I sideboard against humans, and we've got a very strong hand here, provided we can hit that 3rd land. So I'm going to run out the fetch land and pass. The mana's awkward here, though, because we need double black and double red, and also green, and we kind of might want to lightning bolt something on turn 1. Thankfully, we don't have to. That would have made our decision a lot more awkward. So we have the relative freedom to go get Overgrown Tomb, and we just top deck a swamp. So that's awesome. Now the only thing we're lacking is double red for Spyro, but that's kind of the last thing we're going to do with this sequence here. That's going to be like what we play when the dust all settles. Excuse me. So that is totally fine. Opponent clearly drew a Champion of the Parish this turn, otherwise they probably would have run it out last turn, unless maybe they're playing around Wrenn and Six, but I think they'd probably just jam it. Anyway, we're going to push it because, you know, there's an argument for either pushing or bolting. The argument for using bolt and saving push is so that you can deal more easily with champions and lieutenants snowballing in the late game. But with our Liliana plan, we're clearly going on that. I don't expect that to be a thing. So I would rather have Lightning Bolt around, which can hit Mantis Rider without needing Revolt and other Toughness 3 things for that matter. Toughness 3 3-drops, I should say. So in any case, we've drawn a fetch land. To me, it was worth it to just get that red land now, because we are taking up, and of course wanting to pitch a land rather than gas, so now Spyro is going to be online as well. We get a Waterlogged Grove out of their hand, that's actually pretty good. Represents a redraw, of course. They play the Mantis Rider, they'll attack Lily down to 1. We'll tick her up, and this is our problem. Our hand is so good, right? It's so good, so I actually lose the extraneous Lily. Just decided to main phase Bolt a Rider here, and hold up the other Lightning Bolt, admittedly a nice draw. And they play another Mantis Rider, which is kind of the perfect Bolt target, very tempo positive for us. So they don't have a 4th land, it's back to us. We draw Raging Ravine. This is a real nice draw, because it lets us play something of high value to the board, and then play the Spyro while Hellbent. Again, our only problem is that our hand is so good that Liliana's slightly awkward. In fact, I chose not to activate her. I think that's perfectly reasonable here. After all, unless they have a 3rd Mantis Rider, we're going to get more value out of her by edicting next turn, right? So opponent has a Plague Engineer, not the scariest, they'll name human, and that's all they got. So we're pretty happy to cash Liliana in there, simply because it does allow us to get asymmetrical value, and I don't even, we could also have ticked up to pitch a land, but like, with our plan being Tarmogoyf beats at the moment, with that looking pretty significant, I don't have any issue just dealing with the Plague Man that way. Opponent's got a Dismember for our Goyf, which is fair enough. I chose to play the Bloodstained Mire there rather than the Blood Crypt, because that's the one we bought back with the Wrenn and Six. We're concealing information this way. Opponent might be tempted to run out like a Kitesail Freebooter or something if they have one, because we sequenced that way. Opponent will play a Phantasmal Image on Spyro, which is admittedly pretty nice for them. They loot away a land and a Meddling Mage, and they make an Elemental. They see 2 new cards. And then it is back to us, but Phantasmal Image, remember, it has this, if it's the target of any spell or ability, sacrifice it. So Wrenn and Six ping will kill it no matter what it is. That's what we do. And then it's time to fire up the Raging Ravine. Ravine looking good here again. You know what? I might put Ravine on the cover of this league, on the thumbnail, because Ravine was pretty awesome throughout, if I recall correctly. So we put the pressure on with the Ravine, back to the OP. They're just going to scoop it up. They had 3 cards in hand, but probably a combination of bricks and or things that are not able to survive the Wrenn and Six ping, right? Probably just a combination of X1s and lands, not really going to get them over the line. We've got, even if they manage to, like, trade with our Spyro, we of course flash back. We're going to out-top deck them on average, so you don't blame the opponent for scooping up here and wanting to go to game 3. So there we go. Classic Jund stuff, not much more to say. We had removal, we had disruption, we had recursive value, we took over the game, and we turned the screw with Spyro and Raging Ravine. Let's go to the 3rd game, where it's going to be a little bit tougher in some ways on the draw. So as I said, we've got the 4th Inquisition back in, the 4th Liliana makes way, and this hand is, it's a little light on gas for my taste. We don't have a top end, we don't have recursive value, and we're taking a lot of pain from our lands, but you know what, I do think it's a keep. Got a lot of reasonable stuff, and the draw of Wrenn and Six is just perfect. That's the recursive value we needed, especially because the opponent didn't have a turn 1 play, which is just perfect for us. They have a 2-lander with a whole lot of really good stuff, but if you really kind of try, in these situations, you have to game it out. Like, if we take this, what does the opponent do? If we take that, what does the opponent do? And here, Phantasmal Image, by definition, is not a card that can be played on an empty board profitably. Thalia's Lieutenants are not good if they're just a run out on their own against Wrenn and Six. Dismember is kind of whatever. Sometimes we'll take it, sometimes we won't. Usually we won't. Mirran Crusader. So they're kind of far away from casting this. They need to draw a 3rd land. It has to be able to make white, which I think all of their lands probably do besides this island just about. Maybe a Waterlogged Grove or 2. The only exceptions there. But Crusader is the card we can't beat right now. It's very, very good against us. It dies to Bolt, it dies to Liliana Edict, but that is still the card that I think we've got to take there. And we want to fade other things. We want to fade anything that's not an X1, basically. An opponent draws an X1. They draw Champion of the Parish, they play it out. This is perfect, because not only does it die to the Wrenn and Six ping, but they actually kind of wasted half a turn there with their mana, and since they're choked on mana, that could become really relevant. So definitely just run out the Wrenn, ping the X1, and again, hope to fade anything that's not an X1, but that's all they've got. That's all they've got. So we ping the Lieutenant, we Inquisition, because that was our draw for turn. We could have played Liliana too, I think that would have been reasonable, but I'm just playing a little bit more cautiously here, and we see they have a Plague Engineer. So again, that's the thing that's, the thing that's not an X1, therefore it is the thing we're going to take. And I decided here to hold up Trophy rather than run the Goyf into Dismember, because if we just play the Goyf, that's probably what they use their turn for doing. I want them to keep playing to the board actively. So we held up Trophy in case they played something that could survive the Wrenn ping. So I chose not to Trophy here on the end step. We want to give ourselves the most options. If we drew another Wrenn and Six, for example, we want to have the option to ping with this one, then play the other one. We didn't. We drew another Tarmogoyf. So here, you could even cash in the Wrenn and Six, and I think that would be completely viable. But I also decided this is pretty fine, too. We're going to keep the Wrenn around. We're going to keep getting value off of it. We get our Liliana down, back to the opponent, and that's just too much for them. They're going to scoop it up. They have these 2 reactive cards still sitting in hand. Oh, another reason not to play Goyf is because not only does it turn on Dismember, it turns on Image as well. Again, dies to the Wrenn ping, but there's no reason to give them anything decent to do, right? So they were just totally screwed by their own draw and how their own draw lined up relative to ours. This was a really oppressive curve out with Inquisition into a million Wrenn and Six pings, into Liliana of the Veil. Just not something they can contend with without anything beefier at their disposal, which they did not have. So, humans did give us a little bit of a scare there in game 1, but as you can see, the matchup can be really, really good for us post-side in a variety of different ways. That was a really oppressive one. In game 2, it was a little bit more moderate, but, we're just like a mix of outvaluing them and out-tempoing them, and our card quality is higher, assuming we're disrupting well as well. So I like the matchup. I love the Humans deck. It's fun to play against. It's a cool deck, and we take him down 2-0 in the league. Hope you're enjoying this one, my friends, and let's go over to round number 3. And here we are, guys, with a hand that I rate quite highly in a blind game 1. We've got Inquisition, and then Kolaghan's Command. Obviously, high utility card in almost any situation, but the discard mode gets even better when that's what your hand is all in on doing anyway. So this is a snap keep for me. I shock in the Tomb here just in case we draw a Wrenn and Six on the top. Off the top, I want to be able to cast that turn 2. That's the only real reason not to play Swamp. We see opponent is on a 1-lander with Fatal Push, Thoughtseize, double Arkham's Astrolabe, double Archmage's Charm. So this looks like some kind of an Whirza deck to me, and this is a really interesting decision. So number 1, obviously taking the Fatal Push is not what we want to do. We don't have a threat yet, and even if we do, we can kind of buy it back with Kolaghan's Command at some point, potentially. So push is the only thing we definitely do not want to take, but there's a genuine argument for taking any of the other things. So Thoughtseize, of course. Thoughtseizing us back is a little bit rough. They either take away our Disruption or our Kolaghan's Command. When you have more lands than spells, it sucks to get discarded out. But the opponent also kept a 1-lander, so there's an argument for taking away these cantrips and trying to make them lose to their own keep. Maybe they don't draw a land off the first one, and if we take the second one, maybe they're stuck on 1 land for far too long to really get going in the matchup. Finally, Archmage's Charm. This card's a problem for us. Obviously, Permission can be a little bit rough, but more importantly, just drawing 2. Not something we want to leave them with if we have a choice. So it's super interesting there. I did decide to go with the Thoughtseize. We want to be able to Inquisition again next turn. We want to be able to resolve Kolaghan's Command. So that's what I did, but you could have a real argument for either one. And they go, let's see, basic land, Astrolabe, pass, and we have drawn Bloodbraid Elf. Probably a pretty good draw here. It's going to give us something to do on curve, and we see that they've drawn Whirza, Lord High Artificer, and Deprive off of their 2 cards that they've seen. And let's just make sure we're tracking this hand correctly, which we are. I went ahead and took the Astrolabe because they still haven't hit a second land, so we are going for that Mana Screw plan. I think that's totally reasonable. And promptly they do draw the second land, so we're a bit punished for it. Deprive is online. It's back over to us. And we're hoping for something proactive to do. Instead, we draw another land. So back to the opponent. At least we kind of time-walked them. You know, they're sitting behind their Deprive, not really doing anything. And maybe our Astrolabe take does pay off, because they don't have land number 3, which is a disaster for them, make no mistake. So we're just kind of playing draw-go. That works to our favor in 2 ways. Number 1, if you're making land drops and they're not, playing draw-go is good. Number 2, we have Bloodbraid Elf to cast in the face of Deprive. Bloodbraid Elf into known permission is always awesome, because it's a 2-for-1, something's going to get through, but especially Deprive when they've already missed a land drop. Deprive, of course, they have to return a land they control to its owner's hand. Yeah, this is a disaster for the OP. So, Bloodbraid into Kroxa, you love to see that. I think I remember opponent hesitating over whether or not to Deprive this, and then whether or not to Deprive the Bloodbraid Elf. In the end, they just allow them both to resolve, because, again, it's just a no-win situation for the opponent. So Kroxa will get that Whirza out of their hand. We smack him for 3. Back to the opponent. Mystic Sanctuary. You know what? No disrespect intended whatsoever to the opponent, but Mystic Sanctuary is a card that kind of tilts me probably to an irrational point. It doesn't send me into a rage or anything, but I probably hate this card more than it actually deserves, and one of my favorite things to see is Mystic Sanctuary actually representing a downside for the decks that play it. Doesn't happen that often, so I truly relish when it comes in tapped like this. Obviously, this just compounds the opponent's woes here, and we've got the upper hand. We've got the pressure, we've got the board presence, and we can just afford to keep kind of doing whatever we want here. I did decide, though, an option here is to just say go. It really is just to say go. But I did decide to use my mana efficiently this turn. I'm not confident that, we're going to have a great K command or decay target on their turn, on their end step, or whatever, so I did decide to just X-for-1 them with Kroxa. We've already gotten a 1-for-1. It was actually a 2-for-1 the first time it came down off Bloodbraid. And now it's another 2-for-1 because it's really more like a 1-for-0. We trade a card that was not in our hand for their Deprive. And it sent a land back to their hand. So it was a 1-for-0 that was tempo positive. You gotta love it. And then it's back to us. Opponent will replay that third land and pass. We smack him again with the Bloodbraid, and we just say go. We've got all instant speed cards. That's all reactive stuff. Opponent gets to the draw 2 with Archmage's Charm, but, it wasn't until the end of our turn 6 that they managed to do that. So I think, again, that take of Astrolabe was probably pretty relevant with our discard. Opponent does find another Astrolabe, speaking of which, into Field of Ruin, into passing back to us. Notably, Archmage's Charm is not live. It needs triple blue. End step, we're going to bolt them. That's as frisky as I got with the damage here, I believe. I didn't think firing off the Kolaghan's Command Shock was quite worth it. I'd rather use that as a more opportune time, but doing the bolt you upstairs thing, pretty good. All right, pretty good there. Opponent's going to field us. It looks like we have all the mana we need, so you might be tempted to just get a little lazy and not float mana, but I did decide to float it. We'll see what they've got here. Sure enough, it is that Fatal Push. So what I decided to do here is use the floating mana to buy back Kolaghan's Command and force the opponent to discard. Get an Inquisition out of their hand. That's actually pretty good. We could also have destroyed an Astrolabe or maybe shocked them, whatever, but I think the discard mode there is totally fine. And you know what else would be totally fine is just replaying Bloodbraid Elf here, but I do know that we have a couple dead Cascades right now, a couple other less than ideal Cascades. I think it's probably better to not waste the haste, and also to get the Bob down under permission. We're also holding up Abrupt Decay this way, which could be very, very relevant as well. When they pitched that Whirza to Kroxa, you suspected they might have the other one in hand, or maybe they drew it more recently, I don't know, but either way, they do play Whirza, and they have a main deck Nihil Spellbomb. Interesting. So, End step, we're going to decay that construct, and opponent will float mana using it and filter into black to activate Spellbomb. Makes sense, they don't want us getting Kroxa back, and it's just very efficient. Speaking of efficient, we're now drawing 2 cards per turn, and we hit a Thoughtseize, which is you gotta imagine is pretty good. We're gonna Thoughtseize the OP. This is a heck of a game, by the way. It's both decks doing their thing despite their early stumble. Really, really interesting decisions all throughout. We see that Archmage's Charm we knew about, also a Fatal Push, which kills Bob and Goyf, and a Cryptic Command, so this is a bit of a tough one. I thought about this one for a while. I actually don't think it's that obvious to take Cryptic Command, just because forcing them to hold it up does work to our favor in some respects, but at the end of the day, I did decide to just take away the Cryptic. It is just the most powerful card in their hand, and specifically rewarded for this, I was thinking, well, maybe we can cascade into discard and take away the other big payoff. And so I said, well, if it's an Inquisition, maybe we take Cryptic now. And that's exactly what happens. So, I mean, we're just going off. We're just getting some really, really good top decks here. Everything's coming together really cohesively. But Whirza is still Whirza. He's still a powerhouse all on his own. And he's blocking off our attacks here. So it is not all roses, and we know they have a Fatal Push. Whirza spins the wheel, just finds a land. They're going to push Bob. And they're going to say go. We draw Seasoned Pyromancer. The gas just keeps on coming, my friends. You love to see it. So play the Goyf, play the Spyro. We want to leave a red land up here, so in case we draw Lightning Bolt, we can attack and threaten to bolt either Whirza if they block or upstairs if they do not. Instead, we draw another Bloodbraid Elf and Nurturing Peatland. I'm going to attack anyway. It's just a bluff attack. Opponent calls the bluff. Hey, fair enough. So nothing happens. Back to the OP. Feeling a lot more confident now, but they do still have that Whirza on the field. Urza's going to spin the wheel, once again hitting another land, so opponent bricking at the right time. The only thing I think we're really going to lose to at this point is probably the combo. So they don't have the combo, that's good enough for me. End step, we crack Peatland, we've got an Inquisition, and a Wooded Foothills. Not the best draws, but we'll fire off the Inquisition. Opponent will respond with Drown in the Lock, killing our Goyf, and then they've just got another land in hand. So, Bloodbraid Elf, work your magic, my friend. What have we got? Well, we've got another Kroxa. That is pretty awesome. Get that land out of their hand, do 3, and that is actually sufficient for lethal, because now we are attacking, and no matter who they block, they're taking lethal. So, Bloodbraid into Kroxa represented 6 damage, because Kroxa did 3, Bloodbraid did 3. That was lethal. That's what we needed for lethal through the blocker. Didn't want to let them untap. You know, we still could have lost, to them untapping. If they have a good draw step and a good spin with Whirza, who knows? Maybe they assemble the combo, maybe they just stabilize. I don't know. But either way, Kroxa and Bloodbraid not having any more of the Whirza nonsense. We put the game away, and that's awesome. So one of the things that was a little bit bizarre to me is some people, you know, this was admittedly when Kroxa was newer, before people had time to play him, people were saying it's bad to cascade into Kroxa with Bloodbraid. I really don't think so. That's just like a million for one. You already get the inherent 2-for-1 of Bloodbraid. Kroxa sometimes is a 2-for-1 like it was there. Lava Spike plus discard your land. That is a 2-for-1. Not always the very most relevant 2-for-1, but in some cases like this one, it really, really is. Finally, of course, Kroxa can be escaped at least once in most cases, sometimes multiple times, so I don't see why Bloodbraid cascading into Kroxa is a bad thing in a general sense, and we just showed that here. So anyway, that rant aside, nice win, Game 1 here over Whirza. Let's check out Game 2. Okay, so we were in for some hedged sideboarding this time against the blue-black Whirza deck. It's a little tricky to sideboard optimally against because they basically operate like a control deck. They've got discard, they've got removal, they've got permission, they've got value. They're like a blue-black Dimir control shell. But they also have a must-kill creature in the form of Whirza, and to a lesser extent his construct that he comes with, and they have a combo that's their main win condition and that you have to disrupt. So you need a little bit of everything, so you need to be hedged here. And we had 8 cards out, 8 cards in. First I'll tell you what came in. 3 copies of Pillage, 1 Collector Ouphe, and then 1 each of Kolaghan's Command, Plague Engineer, specifically to beat the combo. What were the other 2? Oh yeah, 1 each of Collective Brutality and Ashiok. So it's a little bit hedged. We had access to a second Brutality, chose not to bring it in. This is basically just more discard to take away Cryptic Commands and Archmage's Charms. And 1 Ashiok, it shuts off War of Invention. It can mess with your graveyard if they've got anything going on there, but, you know, just them, like, playing the control game and sticking in Whirza can mean that we cannot afford to have too many static hate pieces in our hand, right? So, for that reason, again, we are hedged with, like, a 1 of here, 1 of there. And in terms of what came out, I cut a couple Lilies of the Veil. You know, if I didn't have so much to do, I'd be pretty happy to leave in 3 against this control variant, even on the draw. But I think cutting down to 2 is fine. We cut all Lightning Bolts, so if they're on a different Whirza deck where they're playing Emery and Gilded Goose, you probably want to keep most, if not all, Lightning Bolts, but they can come out against this variant. 1 Fatal Push, again, you know, you want to kill Whirza in the construct, but you gotta respect all the other stuff, so I hedged, I left 1 in, left 1 out, and finally we just trim a Wrenn and Six, because it's just basically a value engine, which is fine, but you don't really want to see it in multiples at all in this matchup, so I think playing 2 is fine. So a little bit of a complicated sideboarding protocol there, but that's what I do. I think it's pretty good, pretty justifiable overall. Now, is this hand a justifiable keep? Well, normally with one-landers, you just want to grit your teeth and throw them back, but we're on the draw, which is a slightly more incentive to keep a one-lander in general, and we've got 4 discard spells. So I said, you know what? This hand is actually pretty nuts. I'm going to keep it. Opponent goes Mystic Sanctuary pass. They will keep 7. We draw Wrenn and Six. Not what we want to see, but if we hit a green fetch land at all, actually, that would be pretty great. So we open things up with an Inquisition. They've got a 3-lander. They've got Archmage's Charm, Drown in the Lock, Fatal Push, Thopter Foundry. Very good control package here. Once again, Push is the one thing we definitely do not care about, but they've also got the combo piece here, the primo combo piece of Thopter Foundry. The most disruptible one, by the way, like Inquisitioning or Thoughtseizing a Sword of the Meek is obviously a lot worse, so we take away Thopter Foundry fairly happily there. And we draw the second land. That's nice. Could have wished it was a green fetch land, but instead it is just going to allow us to make a land drop and double spell. Now, it's arguably better here to Thoughtseize. It's a very minor case thing, but we could save 2 life here by having them counter a Thoughtseize, because we kind of figured they would. So you might as well lead on a Thoughtseize when they've got a handful of low curve stuff, just if you know the first one's going to get countered, just to save yourself the 2 life. But on the other hand, you know, keeping a Thoughtseize in the tank in case they draw a 4-drop is good too, so who knows. But just something to consider, you know, all these little edge case decisions are relevant as well. But in any case, we do just simply take away that Archmage's Charm, leave them with only a Fatal Push. Opponent drew a Field of Ruin, and because we weren't showing them green, I think it's a pretty fine decision overall for them to just try to mess up our mana, field us main phase. However, it backfires horribly. Frankly, we're just getting pretty lucky overall. Our variance is really good right now against this Whirza deck, because not only do we draw the green land for Wrenn and Six, we also get to buy something back where otherwise we would not have anything to buy back. So we Thoughtseize away that last spell in their hand, and then they're in total top deck mode. Back to us, we've got the Wrenn and Six online, just ticking up for no value this time. Can't quite manage to get the Bloodbraid down due to Blackcleave Cliffs entering tapped, so we're just playing draw go for a minute, opponent making land drops, 2 unknowns in hand, and it is back to us. We lead off on good old Bloodbraid, cascading into good old Tarmogoyf, and they are both going to resolve. So take up the run, hit him for 3, and opponent has another Fatal Push, sure. So back to the OP, once again they just pass. kick things off by trying to attack here with the Bloodbraid, and we do manage to put them to 11. And we do find a fetch land, which means that Wrenn is even more alive for the value. We've got Wrenn at the ultimate threshold. We'll run out of Goyf, and we will pass. I don't think pillaging a land here is very good. They've already got 5. Rather save it to destroy an artifact at this stage of the game for sure. End step, opponent will whir for an Arkham's Astrolabe, so they're not confident in trying to, assemble the combo against us. We're representing Decay, Kolaghan's Command, Trophy, all the rest here at instant speed. So I guess they're just going to whir for an Astrolabe for value, and then that's it. They're going to scoop. They just didn't really do much here. And their opening hand was amazing. 3 lands, 3 interactive spells, and a combo piece. That's kind of what this deck signs up for. They didn't have any clunky uncastable 4-drops. They had chances to draw into them. It was just kind of what they wanted, but because we had quadruple discard, we just ripped the hand to shreds, and admittedly, we drew well. We drew out of our 1-lander. I explained how well their Field of Ruin activation lined up for us, and Bloodbraid Elf did the rest. So there you go, guys. We take down Blue-Black Whirza, pretty comprehensive 2-0. Really hope you're having fun with me. We are 3-0 in the league, and before we go on to round 4, I will encourage you, please do check out Brian Palmer Art, the channel's first official sponsor, in the description. He's an independent artist. He's a great guy. He does awesome work, and you can get a discount on his playmats, tokens, and commissions by using the promo code GrimFlayerMTG for 10% off. All that info, again, in the description of the video, and let us move on to round 4. All right, my friends, we are on fire, and we've won the die roll, and you love to see a 5-spell hand in a 2-lander where all the spells cost 1 or 2 mana. Only thing we could wish for is one of these being a fetch land so we could get value off the Wrenn and Six and curve out, but this is a certain keep, and we'll kick things off with a Thoughtseize, and we meet again, humans. They've got a well-balanced hand, 3-lander, Champ, Lieutenant for the beats, and Meddling Mage and Unsettled Mariner for disruption. So, having gotten burned by Meddling Mage in round 2, game 1, we're tempted to take that, but because we're choked on mana, and because it's just generically pretty great against us, we do take Unsettled Mariner there. Also, we shouldn't really lose strictly to Meddling Mage, because we do have a Bolt and a Terminate in hand. And they might name something else, right? Although usually humans players will name Lightning Bolt. So we draw a 3rd land. Still no fetch land for the Wrenn and Six, but you know what? We're using this to ping their board anyway, right? So ping the Noble, pass back, and then the opponent will indeed go Meddling Mage, naming Lightning Bolt, and we have drawn Bloodbraid Elf. So not really what we want to see, but it does make a 4th land draw really good. And we just get to increase Wrenn's loyalty. One thing I've noticed just by the by is that in my particular build, especially now with Terminate, Basic Forest is just usually pretty awful. I might have fetched the wrong land once or twice before that led me to getting a Basic Forest and led me to having some awkward turns. Obviously, that's not the case here. I haven't had any choice in what lands I'm getting. But just noting, we had to shock in there for a Terminate kind of feels bad. But a minor thing, but something nevertheless. I'm not saying we should play without a Basic Forest. It's just something to keep in mind when you're sequencing, right? But Wrenn and Six is OP because it's keeping them scared. They probably have a 3rd X1 or a land or something in hand, so they kind of can't run anything out unless they want to run it into certain death. And to that end, we could play Liliana. Obviously, that's fine to some degree, but I chose to just play the Goyf because our cards in hand are more valuable than theirs right now. And maybe this turns on a Reflector Mage or something, but so opponent just going for a double spell turn here with the help of Aether Vial. We're just going to Lightning Bolt something. They still get the counter there. But it really doesn't matter. We're just that far ahead. So we Edict and they scoop. Yeah, whatever. They had a couple cards in hand. It's kind of like round 2, game 2. Some people might ask, why didn't they play it out? Well, they're just so far behind. They're just simply not going to win. What's that quote from Gladiator? People should know when they're conquered. Anybody know what I'm talking about there? That's basically what it is. They knew when they were conquered. So a very strong, typical case of junding them out here in round 1, game 1. Not much more to say. Our progressions can be really, really oppressive if Wrenn and Six ping is as good as it has been at times in this league. Lands here are pretty awkward, my friends. They are both painful, and there's a conspicuous lack of green, and also, generally, we need 4 lands for Kalitas. Nevertheless, this hand is awesome. Push, Brutality, Inquisition, and indeed Wrenn and Six if we hit a green land. All really good stuff we want to see. And Kalitas is amazing if we can get there, right? So, OP opening up on a 7-lander with Champion of the Parish. We shock in Blood Crypt. It was actually kind of interesting to Inquisition there, but I chose to hold up removal instead. Yeah, it's an interesting call, but since we know we can Inquisition next turn, and it's almost certainly going to hit something with them having kept 7, I'm pretty cool just doing it this way, saving as much life as possible, again, because our lands are painful. So we're going to push Champion there. They play Champion Vial, then it's back to us, and we do draw the green land, so scratch the plan for Inquisitioning. I think we've got to take the ping whenever we can. The free kill with the Wrenn ping, you gotta love that. So, back to the OP, they will Vial in Champion, and they will Meddling Mage, naming Lightning Bolt, so that's a little bit rough. Now, this was a really interesting spot. We draw Forest, so we know that Kalitas is going to be live next turn if we want him to be. So to that end, what do? Do we Inquisition? Well, if we Inquisition, we're pricing ourselves into probably doing it off of Peatland. That way we can either Brutality second main, or we can play a tapped land and Bolt. Sorry, we can't do that because they're locking out our Lightning Bolt. So yeah, we're pricing ourselves into the Brutality, or we could have just simply spent our turn Brutalitying Meddling Mage, and then Lightning Bolt is unlocked. But the problems with that are, number 1, Inquisition could be dead from there on out, and then number 2, we're on a Kalitas plan without any kill spells. Alright, so for that reason, I did choose to go for the Inquisition here, and we see Kambalan Reflector Mage. Honestly, there's a little incentive to take Reflector Mage just because it's so good, but we're not going to play a creature probably anytime soon. And I like taking Kambal there because it's just going to advance the clock and be a little bit of a pain to deal with. Plus, and so then we of course just Brutality the Meddling Mage. Plus, right now, we get to put the Wrenn and Six up to 3, and we are kind of pricing them into drawing a land and then using the Reflector Mage for no value if they want to attack the Wrenn and Six off the field. All of this coming together for us, it's very, very good in a lot of different ways. Plus, we just basically gained 3 life off of it to boot. So, we're a little bit unlucky that they did draw the land, but ultimately, I think our line has been very, very justifiable thus far. Now, another interesting spot, we can shock in and play the Kalitas, but if we don't do that, we probably have to shock in and pass for Lightning Bolt anyway. And I think that's pretty bad, because, like, we don't have the freedom to crack Peatland, because we need all 4 of these lands for Kalitas eventually. And shocking in and just saying go means that we are, again, spending our kill spells without getting Kalitas down. Now, they're totally hellbent. I think the line here, and the line I took, is to just jam the Kalitas. They need to draw a human to have any kind of a hope here, and they need to draw some pretty specific humans to really punish us. Specifically, another Reflector Mage would be the Nightmare, or indeed what they found, which is Phantasmal Image for Reflector Mage. So this is the absolute nightmare. I don't know how many images they play on average, but it's still a really small subsection of draws that punish us. Like, even a Thalia's Lieutenant or a Mantis Rider is not that big a deal, because we can start bolting other things with Kalitas down. Kalitas is going to outsize that stuff and trade well in the meantime with lifelink and stuff. So the only thing we had to fade was specifically Reflector or Phantasmal Image right off the top, and that's what they got. So that's pretty rough stuff. And we draw Inquisition, which is pretty rough because it's just dead. So, yeah, getting max punished here. Opponent turning them all sideways. We're pretty priced into just bolting here to stay alive. So we bolt the Image, we bolt the Reflector, and we're still down to 3. Opponent will follow things up with Thalia, Guardian of Thraben. We're pressed into cracking the Peatland, but now we're kind of locked out of double spelling, probably, unless we hit 2 perfect draws of, like, Bolt and Push. But we don't. We hit Wrenn and Six and Bloodbraid Elf, so we just lose. Honestly, I do not regret my line at all. You guys can chime in if you think it was wrong, if you saw something that I didn't see. That's totally fair, that's possible. But look, given our incentives there, I think casting the Inquisition early and then going Brutality, that was justifiable. I think it was definitely fine. Definitely, I think better overall to just slam Kalitas rather than, again, shocking in to hold up Lightning Bolts, having a mana-inefficient turn, and then still committing to a Kalitas plan just with no kill spells in hand. Only thing that punishes us there that I can think of is Phantasmal or Reflector. They had exactly 1 turn to punish us. They found it off the top. What are you going to do? I don't regret that, but we did get punished for it, and they took us down. But there is still a Game 3. Let's check that out, see what we can do. Okay, Game 3, sideboarded. On the play against humans, I think those are 3 factors. You know, play, post-sideboard, and matchup that all work in our favor. So I think we're pretty favored, but not with a 1-lander like that. We've got no 1-mana spells, gotta throw it back. This is a pretty strong 6. We are going to keep it. It's a little bit clunky in a couple different ways. So we've got 3 3-drops, only 2 lands. So I did decide to bottom Maelstrom Pulse. I think it's the least efficient 3-drop overall. Kolaghan's Command can really blow out an Aether Vial progression. Plague Engineer is one of our very best cards in the matchup, and I feel like I have to keep the lower curve stuff, right? So, to that end, that's what we do. We bottom the Pulse, we Inquisition. The opponent also mulled to 6, so overall that's pretty fine for us. Vile, Meddling Mage, Thalia's Lieutenant. Well, I do decide to take Vile, even though we have Kolaghan's Command, because there's no guarantee we hit our 3rd land on curve, and if they have to play things out one at a time, our Plague Engineer specifically gets a lot better, as do a lot of our other draws. So, slowing them down, and again, generally, we want to extend the game. So, slowing them down because we have more than enough power to run them over, we've just gotta hit our lands, and instead we drew a 4-drop, so not good, but there's still time to do it. OP draws an Unsettled Mariner. That is a tilt because we are so choked on mana. That's a very, very good one right now for them. We draw Fatal Push. So would I have rather have drawn the 3rd land? Yes, absolutely, because then we could Brutality and pay for it, and we would be operational with most of our other stuff. But at least Fatal Push is not a brick, so we push the Mariner, we pass. Opponent also not stuck on 2 lands, they just neglected to play this 3rd land for whatever reason. I don't know why. Maybe they misclicked. Maybe they want to keep a card in hand for Liliana. I don't know. Or Kroxa, who knows. But anyway, they go Meddling Mage, naming Liliana the Veil, so I guess they are sequencing with Lily in mind. And we draw the Maelstrom Pulse that we bottomed. Feels bad. Just missing the 3rd land. We've got all the gas in the world. Just can't get the 3rd land. So we Brutality away the Mage. It is back to us. Or, excuse me, it is back to the OP. And they play a land that we didn't know about, and then they pass. So I don't know what their sequencing is all about. They're just playing pretty scared, honestly. They're playing scared of, like, Wrenn and Six or other things like Plague Engineer maybe with this Lieutenant. And they're also slow-rolling lands a little bit, so it's a little bit weird to me, but you know, I think if we're this choked on mana, they should just be going for it, but they may know something I don't. They certainly know their own hand and I don't. And we missed the 3rd land drop for the 1,000,000th straight turn, and then they find Unsettled Mariner, which again is just very, very good against us. And now they're going for it. Now they're playing the Lieutenant out because they have the Taxer to protect it. And we've just got a bunch of dead cards in hand until we draw the 3rd land. Thankfully, very, very behind schedule. And I do feel obligated, of course, to get a basic here to preserve our life total, but Plague Engineer is the play because everything else is taxed out, and it's a really nice 2-for-1 here. So, opponent going on Desperation mode, digging, and then finding Mantis Rider, which is a pretty good one. Not gonna lie, and they attack with both, which is what I was hoping they were going to do, frankly, because as good as Plague Man is, I'm so happy taking a 2-for-1 there, like a clean 2-for-1. We literally kill 2 creatures with 1 creature, and more importantly, we get rid of this tax, which is going to unlock our hand. Once again, the hand remains clunky, and the only thing we can do here is actually play Pulse and kill the Rider, so at least we have something to do, but it's amazing how clunky our hand still is after all these turns. Opponent with Athalia's Lieutenant into Phantasmal Image, growing the first Lieutenant pretty significantly to a 3/3. Once again, we just lack the ability to kill the big thing cleanly, so I did decide for the Kolaghan's command, we could have played Wrenn and Six and pinged. We could also have played Wrenn and Six and ticked up to guarantee the 4th land. I couldn't quite bring myself to do either of those things. I think we're due to naturally draw another land, so if we're planning to do that, or if we're saying that a lot of our other draws are good if we don't hit a land, specifically things that can kill the Lieutenant like Terminate, Fatal Push, another Plague Engineer could be good, Liliana of the Veil, blah blah blah, I did decide to go for this clean 2-for-1 of K-Command, so we get another image out of their hand. That's actually really good. That's another thing that could pose a problem for us. And of course we kill the one on board. Opponent cracking another Waterlogged Grove. They're getting a lot of value out of the Canopy lands, and they find another Lieutenant, so, it's just pretty scary. We need to draw a push or something, or a Terminate or something more than ever. Instead, we draw Lightning Bolt. We draw the wrong piece of removal. So, Anger of the Gods is uncastable. Kolaghan's command is starting to feel like the second one is probably not where we want to be, although it is viable, but I did decide, look, I need to hit this 4th land, apparently. Otherwise, I need to, make myself hit the 4th land, otherwise it's never going to come to me, so we go get it. Opponent has a Champion of the Parish. It's a little bit scary. We're not quite dead, though, because we get to go fetch here for a basic mountain, turning on Anger of the Gods and Bloodbraid Elf, and Bolt here, but we are down to 1. So we draw Assassin's Trophy. This is another. We had Trophy, we had Pulse. No, we already used our Pulse Decay. We had a million outs, and finally we found one. So we're at 1 life, though, that's the problem. But we get to ping, we've got the Trophy, let the opponent move to combat first, then we'll Trophy the Lieutenant. So can we stabilize at 1 life? Well, obviously we're going to be really soft to a Mantis Rider, but they have second main phase Unsettled Mariner, not that big a deal. We draw a fetch land, very, very tilting, so I just opted here for the Kolaghan's command, getting that last card out of their hand, cleanly killing the Mariner, and it was Athalia's Lieutenant. So, again, opponent, if they just shoved, might have had us here, but instead we are just barely hanging on in the game. An opponent will pass, and then it is back to us, and obviously a couple interesting choices here. Plague Engineer is interesting, but you get the sense that they're kind of slow-rolling their X1s anyway. So I did go for the Bloodbraid Elf. This has the highest upside, and it's just something proactive to do, and we do, of course, have to end the game. So to that end, I start pinging with the Wrenn. 3 loyalty is sufficient, and we attack. And, we're in actually a pretty good spot for the first time in a while, but the opponent draws the 3rd Phantasmal image of the game. They play Phantasmal on Bloodbraid Elf, and then that is going to do it. I don't really think that's something we should have been playing around, but if we were, it would have been better to play Plague Engineer. But if they could, they're probably more likely at this stage of the game because we've already seen 2 Phantasmals. Again, I don't even know if they always play the full 4. I don't think that's a given. But even if they're on the full 4, I think statistically they're definitely on 4 Reflector Mages. That's something that it would have been way worse to run the Plague Engineer into as a Reflector Mage, whereas Bloodbraid Elf, a lot better against that. So, again, I don't regret that line. I think it was totally fine. I think we just kind of got max punished for it. But realistically speaking, we didn't lose the game on turn 11 or turn 12 by deciding Bloodbraid versus Plagueman. We lost it when we missed land number 3 for turns 3 through 6 or whatever it was, while drawing a bunch of really high curve stuff. So, a tough pill to swallow, but look, Humans is a good deck. It is a very favorable matchup for us, but it's not a free win, and they did just kind of squeak over the line against us here. So, we have cashed another Jund League, my friends. This is only the 3rd league I played since Kroxa has been legal. We have cashed all 3, but we are not 5-0ing. This one feels bad. It was close. It was a great game, as it usually is against Humans, but we did not quite get there. However, we have had a fun league so far. We've still got round 5 to come up. We're playing for that 4-1. Let's see if we can get it done. A reasonable enough hand here in this final round, my friends. Opponent on the play will mulligan down to 6. Or, excuse me, will they? Yeah, they mulligan down to 6, and then they exile 2 Lotus Blooms. So this is ad nauseam. Temple of Deceit confirms it. Every now and then you could see a brew that needs to ramp into like one shot, a ton of mana for exactly one turn, playing Lotus Bloom, but when you see this should indicate Ad Nauseam to you, and the addition of Thassa's Oracle to Modern has brought Ad Nauseam back on the map. But full disclosure, just my meta commentary here, I used to play Ad Nauseam. I like the deck a lot, but I think it's pretty dead. I think we had way too many issues kind of cropping up around it. So the thing with Ad Nauseam is it used to really beat up on aggro decks, but now two of the most prominent aggressive decks are Shadow and Humans. Before those decks existed, they both kind of came into being around 2017, I think. Ad Nauseam beat most aggro decks pretty handily, but those two decks specifically, their forms of disruption, destroy Ad Nauseam. Also, control matchups used to be a lot more favorable than they currently are. Force of Negation in a lot of blue decks, including tempo stuff like Merfolk. That's a disaster for Ad Nauseam. I think Teferi Time Raveler is not really a card they're happy to see. And then you've got just like other decks that used to be good against falling out of the meta. You've got Big Mana, which is still probably a good matchup for them, but it can kill quicker than ever, especially Amulet Titan, so they could even lose a race to Titan, and Incidental Artifact Hate just wrecking them. So just, that was a side rant, but I don't think Ad Nauseam is going to come back. I don't think it's going to be like a tier 2 modern deck anymore like it was in the past, unless they get a real new printing. I don't think a moderately more efficient win con like Thassa's Oracle is sufficient. But as always, guys, I love to learn more. I love to hear your thoughts, so you can let me know what you think about that. But in the meantime, we jam Bob here. I think I tend to play Bob against these combo and big mana decks more often than Goyf, more than most people do, because I really value drawing into forms of disruption, especially in a matchup like this, where our disruption's really live, like all of our disruption's pretty good against Ad Nauseam, right? So that's another reason it's tough out there for Ad Naus, is because Jund is a pretty tough matchup, and Jund is fairly prominent in the meta right now. We're going to go Liliana of the Veil here. So the reason we do that instead of prioritizing the clock is because if they have the 2-card combo in hand, they can cast it next turn. R+1 isn't going to stop them, but neither is deploying a Tarmogoyf going to stop them. We could hold up Abrupt Decay, and specifically if they have Unlife into Ad Nauseam, that could be good. But I think exactly this turn it is safe to risk tapping out for Liliana, because now it's going to be really hard for them to put the combo together from here on out if they don't have it this turn. So that's why we sequence that way. Lotus Blooms will come off Suspend. We got a Gemstone Mine out of their hand, which they clearly did not need. And they do have Unlife, but they don't have Ad Nauseam. If they had Ad Nauseam, they'd crack these, they'd cast it, we'd be dead. It's back to us, and we have a bunch of extra Lilianas in our hand. I guess pitching one is pretty free. And then, basically, from here on out, I'm never going to not be holding up Abrupt Decay. So what we can do here is fetch, play the Tarmogoyf, and pass holding up Decay. And if they try to combo off with just leaning on Phyrexian Unlife, Decay will blow them out. If they draw Ad Nauseam and Angel's Grace, then they can beat us, but that's why we have Liliana. That's why we risk tapping out for her, so they cannot keep multiple cards in their hand. In fact, they empty out their hand entirely. They play Thassa's Oracle, and I believe they scry to the top. End step, we did go Shields down on Decay just because they're hellbent, so we have the freedom to just bolt upstairs. And we could have bolted Thassa's Oracle and kept ticking Liliana up. It really doesn't matter. With Liliana around, with them hellbent, and with us having an Abrupt Decay, we cannot lose from here, as far as I can tell. So we play Kroxa to advance the clock, and we smash in for 3. Or put them to 3, rather, smashing in for 7. Did a total of 10 damage that turn. And opponent did top the combo. They top Ad Nauseam, they draw it for a turn, but we simply Abrupt Decay in response, and that is going to be that. So for those who don't know how the combo works, Phyrexian Unlife says you don't lose the game for having 0 or less life. As long as you have 0 or less life, you take damage as though it was Infect, but Ad Nauseam is not damage, it is loss of life. So they can go to like -50 with this around and draw their entire deck with Ad Nauseam, then kill you with the entire their entire deck in their hand using Simian Spirit Guides for mana if they need to, and then either resolving Laboratory Maniac and drawing a card, or killing you with the Cold Snap instant Lightning Storm. Angel's Grace is a redundant white half of the combo, does functionally very similar to Phyrexian Unlife in this regard, but because we had Decay in response to the Unlife, Ad Nauseam is just kind of being cast for value here, and there's nothing they can find with only 3 life to play with, because they're going to actually lose their life here, and it's actually going to matter, that can do anything against our lethal next turn, right? So that's how that worked. I think Ad Nauseam's a great matchup for us, but they do get Leylines of Sanctity in among maybe other things post-side, and yeah, we'll show you how we sideboarded here for Game 2. Alright guys, so what comes in is kind of similar, overall, very similar to what we did against Dice Factory and what we did against Whirza. A little bit different, obviously, but a lot of the same cards coming in. We have all 3 Pillages once again coming in. This time we have both Collective Brutalities, simply because taking away Angel's Grace, Ad Nauseam, or sideboard instants and sorceries that they might play, like a Sweeper effect or whatever else, can take away Pact of Negation, it can take away cantrips. It's got a lot of targets, so we want the brutalities for discard, and we also play our second Kolaghan's Command and our Collector Ouphe, which is quite effective against Lotus Blooms and Pentad Prisms, which is how they ramp. In terms of what comes out, so I did decide to take 2 Wrenn and Sixes out because ultimately just like seeing one is fine to keep hitting land drops and maybe ping a little bit, or in a really weird game win with an emblem, but doesn't do much in this matchup. Fatal Push and Terminate are both completely dead. Even if they are on the Laboratory Maniac win condition, they draw their entire deck. You try to kill Labman with like a Terminate in response or a push, they will have a Pact of Negation almost certainly to counter it. Abrupt Decay gets around that, and Abrupt Decay is amazing for many other reasons too, but the pushes and Terminates are pretty bad. Only reason you might want to Terminate is if you know they're on a transformational sideboard plan, like Grave Titan or Dragonlord Dramoka or something like that, but we've got trophies for that anyway. So those things come out. Finally, we just take out a couple Lightning Bolts, because all they really do is do 3 damage, and leaving in a couple's fine for closing out the game, but we don't need more than that. We've got better things to do. That said, that hand was a mulligan. It did not have a threat. The mana was awkward. Trophies, double trophy early on, a little bit risky, is our only real way to disrupt the board, so I did mulligan that. Sadly, we come down to a pretty unkeepable 6, like a 1-lander when the 1-land is basic, and when we have 4 3 and 4 drops, not going to cut it, so we have to mulligan again. Pretty sad stuff. But the opponent, I believe, is mulling down with us as we speak, and this is a pretty reasonable 5. We're going to keep it. We're going to bottom Bloodbraid Elf, and we're going to bottom Lightning Bolt. So we've just got 2 lands and 3 pieces of 2-mana disruption. Unfortunately, the opponent has mulligan to Leyline. It is beatable, but right now our hand lines up pretty poorly against it. They go Leyline, suspend Lotus Bloom into Temple of Deceit. So it looks like they got a pretty good 5-2. We play a Raging Ravine, we'll pass. That's land number 3. That's pretty good. And back to OP, they have the second land, and they play the Thoughtseize Oracle. So I've been saying Laboratory Maniac when I've been talking about Ad Nauseam. This is the new Labman. It's a better Labman because it's cheaper, and even if you kill it in response, it's still, if the library is totally empty, which it will be, they still win the game, and you don't need to resolve a draw spell like Serum Visions after it, unlike Labman. So it's effectively cheaper by 2 mana. That can be really relevant. So let me revise what I was saying before. When I mentioned Labman, read Thoughtseize Oracle, right? We're just drawing more lands. It's not really the greatest, but we'll play the Goyf, we'll pass, and Liliana the Veil's a pretty good draw. Of course, we cannot Edict them, but I still kind of like going on the Lily plan, because they don't have any piece of the combo assembled yet, so again, only 2 lands in hand, they can't really put the combo together. Collective Brutality also totally dead in the face of Leyline. Cannot even kill Thoughtseize Oracle. So we hoped that they would discard a non-land or a non-sorcery there, so Goyf would become a 3/4 and could attack profitably, but that's not the case, so we might as well leave it back to block for Lily. Opponent's Lotus Bloom will come off suspend, and they could maybe combo off right now. Maybe they're 1 mana shy, actually. Either way, they don't, and it's back to us, but all we're doing is drawing lands, right? So we discard one of them, we play the other. We attack for 3. It's about all we can do. And then we attack and they do block. So, this was just an inexplicably bizarre play. I was playing late at night, it was at the end of the league. I even thought to myself, I should wait till their turn to do this, but then I just said, nah, it's fine, they only have 1 card in hand. I just didn't think they had Ad Nauseam, but the specific reason not to decay main phase is in case they have Ad Nauseam, because then they can cast it for value, which is exactly what they do. So this is a very important teachable moment, as they say, a learning moment here. For those who are not familiar with Ad Nauseam, they can cast it for value, and it's actually a perfectly viable thing to do because they have a lot of life total to play with here. And they're just going to get risky. They're going to go all the way down to 3 and try to kill us or stabilize next turn. Of course, if we had done this on their upkeep, they would have been tapped out for their turn. So they would have had to be a lot more conservative with that Ad Nauseam. They would have still fired it off, but they would have had to stop, maybe around, 10 life or something. It would depend on what they wanted to play around us having. But anyway, so mistake from me, and now they get to go off. They get to do a bunch of stuff, but they did not draw another Ad Nauseam, so they don't have the combo immediately to hand. So instead, they spend their turn developing their board, use a couple Simian Spirit Guides, they deploy a Phyrexian Unlife and a Pentad Prism, setting themselves up for next turn. Maybe they can Spoils of the Vault to find their Ad Nauseam. And then they discard Temple of Enlightenment. So again, this was preventable, this was avoidable. Should have upkeeped it, and I bet we'd have the win here. Maybe not, because, they drew Path to Exile too, so they could have played a more controlling game, and we cannot Liliana ult as long as Leyline is there. So make no mistake, it would have still been a game, right? It would have still been a game, but Raging Ravine seeing a lot of action this game. We'll fire them both up, and it's definitely correct to do this. Just put them as low as possible. It can matter. We want to at least get them to 0 or less in the face of that Path to Exile, right? So mission accomplished. Opponent will spoils, and they spoils for something that's not, they spoil for Thassa's Oracle, and then I guess they spoil again for something that's not in their deck, which is another way they can get there. They name a troll card like Abandon Hope or something like that, they exile the rest of their deck, and then they play Thassa's Oracle for the win. So yeah, first they spoils for the Thassa Oracle, then they spoil for something that doesn't exist, and then they win. So, again, this was avoidable. I should have done that on their upkeep, and it would have been a interesting game. As it was, they were able to, frankly, have a really good value Ad Nauseam that translated into a win. So, hey, I think Ad Nauseam's a super cool deck. I love it. I always, when I played it, loved the games that I won on the back of ad nauseating, whatever the term is, for value. Certainly doesn't happen every day. It's certainly not the optimal use case of the card. But when you can put together a combo kill on the back of that, in the face of disruption, it always feels pretty good. That said, I shouldn't have given him that window. Let's go to Game 3, see if we can do a little bit better here on the play. Final game of the league, guys, and this is, our luck has started to fall apart a little bit. We're taking a lot of mulligans, getting some worse variants near the end of the league, and this one's kind of a head-scratcher, because if they don't have Leyline, and if we draw a second land, our hand is nuts. We've got 3 discard spells, Goyf, Ouphe, Trophy. We've got everything we could ever want, but those are 2 pretty big ifs, and our hand is just totally stuck doing nothing in the face of a Leyline until we hit a second land. And if we fail to do that, our hand goes absolutely nowhere. So it's a high-risk, high-reward keep. I think the matchup's good enough that I'm not that interested in high-risk, high-reward keeps, so I did decide to throw it back. This hand is pretty clunky. It's less exciting, but it is more balanced. It's more functional, and it is a keep. Better than going to 5 in my view. We just bottom a Pillage because we cannot even cast the one we're going to keep, at least right now. So our best draws like a Blackcleave Cliffs or a Blood Crypt or a Fetch Land, it's going to turn everything on in our hand. Unfortunately, the opponent will keep 6 with a Leyline, so definitely makes our hand a lot worse. Inquisition's dead, Liliana's worse in the face of that. And the opponent just goes Gemstone Mine Pass, and we draw another Tarmogoyf. Not what we want to see, at least not at the moment. So we play our mighty 0-1 and we pass, and we're starting to wonder whether it's all just going to come crashing down here. But then the opponent misses a land drop, so they kept a high-risk, high-reward hand of their own, probably on the strength of Leyline and probably on the policy of not wanting to mulligan against the attrition deck any more than they already did, so I get it. But certainly helping us out here, because we had a pretty weak opening progression, but now we get to make our third land drop, which is just what we wanted to do. And honestly, playing Pillage there is fine too, but I did decide that getting the Liliana down as early as possible, there's a lot to say for that as well. I don't know if Ad Nauseam plays Veil of Summer. I should look that up. I guess like giving them just a cantrip by playing Liliana was slightly risky. But either way, we get Ad Nauseam out of their hand, and then they don't make another land drop, which means that we're just kind of gonna beat them, you know. We'll we'll get another land out of our own hand, we'll smack in for 4 because pillaging does not grow the Goyf if we do it first main, and then we will pillage in the second main. They've got a response, Spoils of the Vault, so they spoils for a Pentad Prism, trying, I guess, to hope to naturally draw 2 lands off the top, and then cast Pentad and like, ramp that way, in time to win. But Spoils, you lose a life for each card you reveal until you reveal the chosen card, and they go all the way down to 1 to find their Pentad Prism, and they don't have a land, so they're gonna untap, and they're gonna draw, and then they're just gonna scoop, so that's what we get for putting the pressure on. We're pressuring them in 3 different ways. We've got the Tarmogoyf, who finally became a respectable 4/5, we've got the Liliana working on their hand, and we destroyed their land after they kept a low land hand, so pressure on 3 different axes, forcing them into a kind of desperation move of hoping to get really lucky off of a spoils, and then subsequently get lucky off the top deck. Didn't happen for the OP, but you know what, even if they had a less painful spoils, I don't think we were losing that one anyway, so there you go, guys. A nice 4-1. Third run out with Kroxa Jund, or just Jund as I call it, because I think Kroxa is part of the family now. The results continue to be very good, and let's take a look at the list again for a little bit of a wrap-up. Okay, my friends, so we were as close as you can really get to a 5-0. I think we were very, very favored. Game 3 on the play, post side against humans, we just didn't draw the third land for way too long. That's the only match we dropped, and we're pretty favored there, so I think the signs for this deck in general, and specifically a build like mine that leads more into red for Kroxa and Pillage are probably the 2 most important things, but also Spyro and Anger as supplementary cards. I think it's totally feasible. Now, again, this is a small sample size. I've only played 3 leagues, and this was only 1 league that we just saw here, obviously. But so far, and I'm not a Skoos hater, I love Skoos. Skoos is one of my favorite cards in the Rock. But here in Jund, I'm not really missing it. Skoos would not have saved us against humans. Not even close. Our issue is being choked on mana. Skoos is a mana sink. You need a lot of mana for it to be useful. And in Jund, I've just always felt that the 3-color mana base just pulls in way too many directions to make Skoos really all that viable. Now, if it's better than your other options, by all means. Or if it's great in your local meta, by all means. But I don't think Skoos is the difference maker in humans. Like, again, I think if we're losing, it's because we got completely nut drawn or our own deck's fail rate kicked in, which neither of those things means that Skoos is going to be the make or break. Beyond that, you know, you've got Skoos very, very good against attrition matchups, but you know what? So is Kroxa, and if he sticks, so is Bob. And we saw Bob look really good here. I think Bob and Kroxa are both clearly superior to Skoos against control, against big mana, and probably against definitely against most combo decks as well. So when I first started, I was like, I think Kroxa Junds, here is why. I made the video, I made the case, but I was like, maybe I will end up wanting to go back to Skoos. So far, after 3 leagues and after more games in the tournament practice lobby on top of that, I don't have any plans, personally, to go back with my own stock list to Skoos anytime soon at the expense of cards like Kroxa and Bob, at least. Maybe we can work all 3 of them in, I don't know. I'll examine that. But we will be playing Skoos in Jund soon for you on the channel, because we've got a main deck Klothys Jund list lined up for donation leagues that I want you to subscribe to the channel so you don't miss out on that. That's coming soon. That's a more traditional Jund list with Skooses and a little leaning into green a little bit more. And again, like I said, a main deck Klothys. We've also got a donation league coming up where the donor and I are working together to tune BG Rock, stock BG Rock for the current meta, trying to make it as efficient as possible, taking that out for a spin. We're going to do some other stuff to other donation leagues in the works. I want you guys to see all of it, so please do subscribe to the channel. Give me a thumbs up here if you enjoy this content. Leave a comment, let me know what you're thinking, and if you're enjoying this content, I would love if you could jump on Patreon. Kick a few dollars my way. I'm not ashamed to ask for it. It really does make a huge, huge difference in my life. As a father, expenses are always tight, and especially when you're trying to stay abreast of the latest cards. MTGO prices are pretty bad these days because I think Arena has something to do with it, but anyway, your support helps me make more time for the channel, and it also helps me get the new cards, like Kroxa, so I can test them for you on day one and bring you the best content that I know how to make. So thank you so much, as always, to all Patreon supporters, including our 5 newest ones. We have Thomas Sloboda, Paul Jacob, Benny Jackson, That Vietnamese Guy, and Alexander Dakic. I truly appreciate each one of you coming aboard, and I appreciate the long-standing Patreon supporters very much, as you know. Thank you so much for watching. Stay tuned to the channel, and I will talk to you soon. Hope everybody out there has a wonderful day.